this tonight, I appreciate your patience. About 20, 30 minutes before the broadcast, and it's like, oh, so I either got to talk about what I've been thinking about all day, and I'm not paying attention to the news or anything like that, or talk about a subject that I think that you want to talk about. The thing is I think that the stuff that we've been talking about in the past few broadcasts will kind of brings things together, right? Like, what if what we're really looking for here is we're not looking for answers or the ultimate truth or enlightenment or anything like that. At least I'm not. What we're trying to find here is some undercurrents of truth that other people have discovered in different realms of conscious exploration to help us further our conscious exploration. Because that's the idea, right? You take what you've learned from earlier people and you evolve it. And if Thomas Campbell's right about his theory of the greater conscious system, that's pretty much what we're here to do. It's nice to think, though, that we all have our own hero's journey and stuff like that. I like thinking of it that way, and maybe we do. But from a more like logical approach, I think it could be that we're just this like organic data gathering machine, right? I just don't think that. I think my intuition still tells me that that's close, but I'm missing something. And I think that something has to do with love and connection and the heart and all the woo stuff. So remember, Circuits of Force was text that Dion Fortune put out back in the day. So that I guess she put out for her Society of the Inner Light. And that kind of revealed a lot of the mysteries and stuff. So, and I was listening to the Union of the Unwanted podcast, and this was years ago. And I thought about broadcasting that tonight, but then again, it might rub some people the wrong way, and I don't want to do that. But have we got a better understanding of what's going on energetically when we do conscious exploration? Do we have a better understanding of what this phrase magic and the occult actually mean and what's really going on here? Because I still wonder if we do. Because every time I read text, and which is why I'm reading text on the air and then talking to you about them, I read the text and then I go online and I look at most of the content that's put out, and it's usually either massively like conspiratorial and super polar, trying to freak you out about stuff, or some of it's just complete horseshit. Just to be honest with you, like there's flashy thumbnails that say that they're going to either scare the hell out of you or give you this big secret and this big mystery, and then you click on it and it's like somebody's basic interpretation of stuff that they read, and they haven't even gone through the text. You could tell they haven't gone through the whole text. And you know what, man? Like when I research, I don't know about you, and maybe it's because my recall sucks, but when I research, I have to read stuff more than once. Isn't that what's called studying? I think. Yeah, I think that's called studying. I have to read stuff more than once so that I can actually learn it. Just like I have to go do things sometimes. I'm a quick learner. I'm not saying I'm not a quick learner, but some things I think we all have to do more than once to learn them. So when you hear phrases like, well, just follow your heart, or it's real simple, or whatever, a lot of times, I mean, the path to self-discovery takes an entire lifetime. If you really wanted to like discover everything about yourself, your heart, your mind, your consciousness, the mysteries, and then bring somebody else into the picture, just one person, that's going to take you at least a lifetime or more. It should. Because I don't think that people are that simple. Even the so-called simple men, you ever get these guys, oh, I'm a simple man. Yeah, I'm a simple man too. I understand what you're saying. But deep down, there's some really complex stuff going on there. And it's like better to understand yourself if you actually want to change, because to know thyself is the biggest journey that we're here to do, I think. That's all opinion, though. So Gareth Knight puts in his opinion. And by the way, I still thank you guys for coming out every single night doing this live with me, because I miss live radio. Like live radio, they used to do live radio that was syndicated. So I don't hear any syndicated live radio shows anymore. In live radio, at any point in time, something crazy could happen. And you knew that when you were listening to it, it was happening right then and there. And it wasn't touched up. It wasn't pretty sometimes. The callers were live. And that kind of slowly dissipated to now it's like live streaming. And then live streaming is kind of taken over by gaming, which I don't think it's good or bad. I'm just saying I miss radio. So the reason why I like doing this every night live, knowing that I could just flop out, and some nights I do flop out, it's because I love this. I love this live thing. I want to try to bring live radio back. If I could like have one wish, like if a genie showed up, he's like, you got 3 wishes. One of them would be, let's figure out how to bring live late night radio back the way it used to be. And no, I'm not just talking about Art Bell. I'm just saying that whole feeling that we had, or nostalgia or whatever it is. So anyways, I had to get that out. Because that's what I did today. Okay, just to let you know, all day, and I know it's probably going to sound pathetic, but I worked for about 8 hours today, and I was just riding around in the car, gigging it, okay? And I listen to old radio shows, and part of my mind, whether it's Phil Hendry or Art Bell or whoever, right? And part of my mind is trying to imagine that this happening in real time, like real time radio. And it feels good. But on the other hand, I'm missing out on everything. That's why whenever I do these broadcasts, oh man, you hadn't heard of this? I don't keep up with pop culture. That's what we got AI for. Now I can just, if I get home in time, I'll just type up, to Grok, give me the pop culture rundown, so I don't have to sift through everything. We all should embrace the inner Art Bell, I think. So, going back to this yoga thing, this force, right? When think about this too, the first time you put on your earphones, like when you do the Monroe stuff, Robert Monroe, I know it's old school, but he has a saying in there that says, it was the introductory free one where he talks about that you have these waves of energy. So you start listening to the ocean waves. If any of you have done the Monroe tapes, you know what I'm talking about. So you start listening to the ocean waves, and he describes the ocean waves as energy, and the same energy that the waves represent, you have in you. And then he goes on to say, we're going to teach you how to fluctuate this energy in you in a controlled manner. Now, that's not exactly what he says, but in long story short, that's what he's saying. What I find about this energy when I read these occult texts and when I listen to Monroe's stuff, and not just Monroe, but I refer to Monroe, but they're talking a lot about the same stuff, okay? But yoga is a big deal. It's still a big deal. I checked on that, by the way. Yoga's still a big deal. So Gareth Knight goes on to say that there seems to have been a space of elementary books on yoga just before Dion Fortune actually wrote The Circuit of Force, and most of which she felt would have been better left not published. But in more recent times, in elementary yoga have become a popular part of the curriculum of many an adult education college. And right now, you can take a yoga class anywhere you go. But you should really look into what the word itself means and what yoga is really all about. Yeah, it does keep you physically fit, but it does have a mystical context to it for a certain reason, right? It has a lot to do with energy and how energy works, and even sacred geometry. You could let me think, if you want to get into that, you could listen to what's that guy's name, Sadhguru or whatever, he was on Joe Rogan. He started talking about it, but he didn't get too deep into it though. So But we use it as like a lot of times just as physical exercise. Sometimes it helps us relax. We use it for an elementary meditation technique. But what Gareth Knight is saying is this approach to yoga would appear to do no harm and may well do a considerable amount of good. Changing patterns of population in the post-war years, together with the exodus of the Tibetan Lamas as a consequence of Chinese intervention in their country, has caused a considerable body of Hindu and Buddhist teachings to become available in the West. And that's probably why we talk about it so much now, if you really want to look into the history of it. So those of us who feel that we have a calling to follow Eastern tradition spiritually now have authentic means more readily to hand to test their vocation if you want to do that stuff. But for most of the information on yoga, Dion Fortune turned to the books, and she talks about this, of Arthur Avalon. And he was perhaps the first Westerner to approach the doctrines of yoga and spent half a lifetime searching for key documents and an Indian guru willing to help him translate the texts. So the Serpent Power appeared in 1918, which, after several chapters of introduction to the chakras, mantra, and theory and practice of yoga, provides a translation of two important texts on Kundalini Yoga: the description of the 6 centers or chakras, and the 5-fold footstool, which covers the 7th and highest chakra, the Sahasrara. I always say that wrong. The Sahasrara at the top of the head. So Kundalini Yoga forms a part of Laya Yoga, and in the collection of essays and lectures, Shakti and Shakta, published at the same time, Woodruff differentiates the 4 main types of yoga: mantra yoga, hatha yoga, Laya, I would say Laya, but it's probably Laya yoga, and Raha yoga, or Raja yoga, however you want to say that. The general characteristics of which are described in that book, The Serpent Power. Pretty cool book, too. So the general principles and meaning of Kundalini Yoga had never been before published, although they had long been subject to a great deal of curiosity and a lot of ill-formed speculation. Now, this has been encouraged by a veil of mystery drawn by self-proclaimed experts for their own financial or prestigious benefit. You think that's still going on today, by the way? They didn't even know. That's funny, too, because they really didn't even know that much about yoga until that book came out. And then you had all these like yoga teachers going around selling classes and stuff. So that's okay. Whatever. Everybody's got to make a living, I guess. But the system is not exclusive to India. And Sir John acknowledges similar notions in Islamic Sufi mysticism and Maya scripture, the Popol Vuh. So this form of yoga is called tantric because it appears in various manuals of Hindu worship and occultism, which are called tantra. Every time we talk about tantra, you know what people start thinking about, right? But it's deeper than that. So the particular form of tantric yoga that is known as Kundalini Yoga is concerned with raising a power in the body that Sir John Woodruff calls the Serpent Power. This power is said to be a divine cosmic energy that is a form of prana, which means vitality or life principle. It is figuratively called the goddess Kundalini and may be visualized in the form of a sleeping serpent coiled at the base of the spine. When aroused, the Kundalini passes up 3 channels that run parallel to the spine on an inner level. The central one is called the Sushumna, and the 2 others that spiral around it are called Ida, pale in color and regarded as feminine, which carry a negative current, and Pingala, which is red in color and regarded as positive and carrying a positive solar current. So when you do visualizations, a lot of times when you do breathing exercises, sun and moon visualizations, things like that, they're kind of archetypally, I would say, or I wouldn't even say archetypally, but it's corresponding to these energies. They're trying to stimulate these energies through the power of your imagination. So each of the latter is associated with one of the nostrils. Y'all have done that breathing yet? Those exercises? I'm stopped up. I can't. No, I'm just playing. But you know what I'm talking about. Which is why one technique of yoga is learning to breathe through each nostril independently. The central channel, the Shushramna, runs from the Muladhara chakra, which we talked about yesterday, at the base of the spine through an opening called the Door of Brahman. And the three channels pass through 6 centers of consciousness, or chakras, as they proceed upward in line with the spinal column. And yes, I do think Kundalini energy is real, by the way, for sure. Thanks for subbing, Joe K. Appreciate it, brother. Joe's a good, solid name, you know? Anyways, sorry, I got ADD. That happens. These centers of subtle force should not... Wait, where did I say it? Let me start over. The 3 channels pass through 6 centers of consciousness, or chakras, as they proceed upward in line with the spinal column. And these centers of subtle force should not be too closely associated with organs of the physical body. They are visualized as lotus flowers, or differing numbers of petals. And these normally hang downwards but become erect as Kundalini passes through them. At the Anja chakra, at the brow, the 3 channels become one and proceed to a 12-petaled lotus that is in the pericarp of the Sahasrara chakra, or 1,000-petaled lotus at the top of the head. Now, each chakra has a number of visualized symbols associated with it, and in this respect resembles the symbolic attributions of the spheres and the paths of the Kabbalistic tree of life, even though it doesn't look the same. Kind of talked about that yesterday too. Although, of course, the detail of the symbolism is oriental rather than occidental. Why does this matter to OBE travelers? Imagine that all of the teachers that teach OBE stuff, all of them, if they would say, I wonder if I should look into some of these occult teachings, really look into them, not, draw back with fangs every time they hear that word occult, and really look into it and say, I wonder if I should use this force while I'm doing my OBE stuff. I wonder what would happen. It consists of various animals, gods, and goddesses. We're talking about the tree here, with geometrical sigils of the elements, or tattvas, and letters of the Sanskrit alphabet, which is a holy alphabet of the Orient, as the Hebrew alphabet is a holy alphabet of the West. So, that's the tree. The red Muladhara lotus has 4 petals and is associated with the region midway between the genitals and the anus and the male human body. Within this lotus, the tattva element is earth, whose strength, firmness, and solidity is signified by a yellow square and an elephant. Here also is the goddess Kundalini, she who maintains all living creatures, lying coiled asleep, shining as bright as lightning, covering with her head the door of Brahman. And this is pretty cool because I did take some college, by the way, and I studied world history, and this religion is the oldest religion on the planet. I thought it was Hebrew, but it's not. It's not. The vermilion 6-petaled oh God, I hate these words. Svadhisthana. That's how I'm going to say it. The Svadhisthana lotus comes next and is associated with the root of the genitals. The water tattva reigns here in the form of a white crescent moon, and the animal symbol is a white makara, similar to an alligator. You seen any of these, what they're talking about here? Have you seen any of these symbols in certain tattva or tarot cards? Speaking of the tattva cards, I still have people that are waiting on tattva cards. I've had to pay for these things twice. For some reason, Customs decided they wanted to. How does that even happen? We can talk about that later. Look into the tattva system, though. All right. So next comes the 10-petaled Manipura lotus, lustrous as a gem, associated with the region of the navel, wherein is to be found the fire tattva, a red triangle. These correspond with the tattva cards too, and the ram, which in Eastern mythology is carried of the Lord of Fire. The Anahata lotus in the heart region is also red and has 12 petals. Its element, tattva, is a smoky-colored 6-pointed star of air, and its animal is a swift black antelope. And at the region of the base of the throat is the Visuddhi lotus. A smoky purple color with 16 petals. Its elemental tattva, a white circle of ether, and its animal, a white elephant. Then between the eyebrows, we come to the Anja lotus of 2 white petals, whose tattva is mind. Finally, there is the Sahasrara, or 1,000-petaled lotus at the top of the head. Now, this is a very basic outline of the chakra system, which is its fullness, and it's the fullness of it, and based like it's just the basic outline. All right. Every time I look at these things too, there's like, oh, there's 6, there's 7, there's 12, there's 13, there's 20 chakras. Let's just stick to these right here, okay? So in its fullness is of considerable complication, and details vary from school to school, but we'll stick with this one. So as in Western occultism, there is no one and only true secret symbols or secret system of symbolism. That's another thing too. When you hear people talk about symbols, like this is the only true set of secret and sacred symbols, that's probably bullshit. Although many may darkly hint at having possession of one, and may even believe this to be true, naively assuming that because their own system works for them, it must be unique and universal. The general principles may agree, but the details vary quite legitimately from school to school and between individuals. Now, the simplified Tattva system employed by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, for example, differs in several respects from the system described in the Serpent of Power. I think this is important because people are going to get this stuff confused, but Sir John Woodruff was at pains to point out that raising Kundalini is not the be-all and end-all of yoga like some people think it is, despite the belief amongst many Westerners that that's the case. The traditional Indian approach is, according to Woodruff, more concerned with states of consciousness than with raising powers. And that's the case across the board. Across the board. So when I say things like high magic, ceremonial magic, things like that, most of the time a person, and this is why a lot of people, they get bored of it and walk away, is because this whole thing is designed around self-transformation and higher states of consciousness. That's it. It's not about, I need to manifest girls, cars, and money, or whatever it is. Like, it's not about that at all. What happens is because you go through a self-transformation or you go through an alchemical change, your life changes. And the will, which some people call, where you're trying to enforce your will upon things, and that's black magic, whatever you want to call it. The will is the divine will. Like when your will lines up with God's will, in other words, or you could look at it like when your higher self lines up with your lower self, however you want to look at it, that is the will. It's not as polar as some people think, but anyways. The traditional Indian approach is, according to Woodruff, more concerned with states of consciousness than with raising powers, and in particularly the raising of lower consciousness into states of higher consciousness, like I just said. So the aim of the yogi is to raise consciousness from the limitations of the physical world experience to the unlimited wholeness, which is perfect bliss. It follows that the highest aims of yoga can only be allied to a religious disposition, whether that disposition be in terms of monism, where all is identified with God, or theism, where creator and creation are defined as separate. Doesn't matter. Practitioners of yoga, by nationality and culture, may be followers of a variety of Hindu or Buddhist religious beliefs, and there seems no reason why there cannot be practitioners with a Western cultural background. But there's always a however. However, it is doubtful if anyone could get very far who assumes the system to be no more than a kind of interior bodybuilding. Through the practice of breathing techniques and physical postures, it's just people that look at it like it's some kind of interior bodybuilding with the object of acquiring strange or miraculous powers. I'm not trying to burst people's bubbles here. I agree with him on this, but like the majority of spirituality, including the mystic and magical side of things, isn't about magical powers. Even though Dion Fortune talks about certain powers come to life, you already have stuff that's dormant inside of you, but you have to think a lot of that stuff that is dormant was a lot of it was just blocked off from the time you were a little baby till now. You probably don't even remember the energy that you felt then. You could think about it, but you probably don't. So attention is paid to the physical body as a vehicle for the spirit. Purity of mind is identified with purity of body, and the meditation postures or asanas are intended as an aid to clear and correct thought, apart from hygienically and calisthenically securing a healthy physical condition in an unhealthy climate. Yeah. So that helps with that too. Then if you get into what's that called? Theosophy. So the chakras of Annie Besant and CEW Leadbeater. I don't know if any of you guys have read those texts. Pretty good stuff. I actually have an audio book out with that, with CW Leadbeater. Man, so with this in mind, we may turn to a line of teaching based upon the yoga chakras that was energetically popularized by the theosophist writer C.W. Leadbeater and Annie Besant. Their inspiration is derived from the monumental works of H.P. Blavatsky. Boy, she gets talked about a lot, doesn't she? Like she's some kind of occult superstar. I got to tell you, man, I think Blavatsky was pretty rad. I'm talking about like some stone surfer or something, but a lot of the stuff that she says doesn't, like the stanzas and all the things she's talking about. I've read it so many times. It's just hard to wrap my head around. It's cool, like a lot of the things she's talking about. And I think she's one of the only people that actually, some say they've witnessed her bring things into physical manifestation through the astral, but that's neither here nor there. It's not proven, but a lot of people talk about her, man. Like she's the freaking Batman of, the occult world or something. Bat lady, Catwoman. You get what I'm saying? So Isis Unveiled and the Secret Doctrine. Definitely read them if you haven't, though, which were in turn largely based upon Eastern, esoteric, and religious thought. Blavatsky indeed deserves credit for predating most efforts to open up Eastern wisdom teachings to the West. Now, C.W. Leadbeater and Annie Besant set out to render much of Blavatsky's teachings into more accessible forms, and one of Leadbeater's most popular books was The Chakras, complete with colored illustrations. And this didn't appear until 1927. Can you imagine writing about this stuff back in the 20s and 30s? It's nowhere as cool as it is now. Like, it's all over YouTube and everybody's stuff. Back then, you were a freaking weirdo, like a straight-up weirdo if you were talking about this stuff. But in 1927, he had published the gist of it as early as 1910 in a publication called The Inner Life. Thus, his views were well known to Sir John Woodruff, who spent some time in his introduction to the Serpent Power, pointing out how Leadbeater's teachings diverges from the traditional Indian yoga system. Now, this accusation of divergence from native tradition would not have been a source of surprise to Bishop Leadbeater, nor very much cause for concern, for he honestly considered that his method was an advance on the native traditions. He had similar views with regard to Christianity. Now he's touching Christianity. That's a no-no. He had similar views with regard to Christianity and set about adapting and developing the creeds and liturgy of the liberal Catholic Church. The liberal Catholic Church? Is that still around? With great gusto in works such as the Science of the Sacraments. One major difference between the chakra system that is promulgated by Leadbeater on the one hand and by Woodruff on the other is that Leadbeater declines to recognize the Svadhisthana chakra. He is unhappy about its sexual connotations and substitutes it for the spleen instead. So think about this from here on out. Anytime you read a book, I'm not saying it to be a fact, okay? But anytime you read a book or a picture book or whatever you get at your local witch talk store, and they show the chakras, and you see that, that Svadhisthana chakra, and they have it connected with the spleen. Remember that historically, it was probably connected with the sexual organs. Probably. And they kind of move stuff around because, some people are scared of sex, even in the occult. Scared to death of it. And giving his reasons for doing so, he cites the dangers of phallic sorcery and schools of black magic that use Kundalini for the purpose of stimulating the sexual center. That's understandable, because that happens. Make no mistake about it, it happens. Black magic is used in that sense. But just because it's used in that sense doesn't mean that we should hide the truth about it, because somebody's polar and selfish, and you still shouldn't hide the truth, not in my opinion. But Sir John Woodruff claims never to have heard of such kind of abuse, and points out that concentration upon the lower centers in the yogic fashion should quiet the passions rather than stimulate them and arouse them. Although he concedes that it is quite possible that approaching the centers with another attitude, practice, or purpose, like whatever your intentions are, might well produce other results. So here's the thing, like, do people join occult societies so they can get laid? Yes, they do. I'm not going to make a judgment about it or whatever, but it's weird, if you ask me. It's completely weird. One of these days I'll tell you guys a story. I'm not comfortable telling this story yet, but I will tell you a story where I kind of witnessed this, and it was... It's more funny than anything, though, and I don't want to come off degrading or anything like that, because everybody's on their own journey. But we're humans, man. We do stupid shit all the time, even in the occult world, or when we're searching for truth. All right, so a more fundamental difference lies, however, in the different sense of shade of meaning that the theosophical writers put on some of the traditional yoga terms. And this can be confusing when one tries to establish points of correspondence between two other systems. But here's the thing, though. You know what I find funny? As much as all of these guys are like trying to put a system together of either conscious exploration or energetic work in the body, whether it's chakras or the tree of life or whatever, or creation centers, the macrocosmic tree, like... Not a whole lot of them. Some of them do, and we'll get into this later because I'm leading up to all this to show you like kind of where my research has went. But they don't talk a lot about what happens to them in the OBE experience. They do talk about getting out of body, but they don't like journal it as much as they do like Monroe or people that aren't in the occult or aren't trying to teach you these systems or things or trying to figure out what creation is or made up of. Like, you got to do it, like, just try it. Pick an occultist and read about them, like, say, Israel or Gardi or whatever, and then read, like, Robert Monroe's Journeys Out of the Bodies. And you will see, like, parallels in everything that they're talking about. But one of them is exploring consciousness, and that's all they're doing. And the other one is trying to, figure it out, figure everything out, label it, make a map out of it. What's the spiritual connotation? How does it, how does it explain reality and existence and creation? And where's the energies in the body versus another person just trying to figure out what consciousness is? It gets trippy when you start comparing the two. So in particular, Woodruff also challenges the conception and definition of the terms astral and etheric, which, it has to be said, and this can get confusing too, Madame Blavatsky treated somewhat inconsistently in her works. Leadbeater describes the chakras as vortices of etheric matter, into which astral forces rush, as from a higher plane, at right angles, to the whirling disc. The impact of these forces upon the discs causes secondary forces to be set up at right angles to the inflow of astral force, which gives the appearance of petals to the lotuses. And the incoming astral forces each bring a particular logordial influence or aspect of divine life into the physical body via the etheric double. Each of the chakras so formed is thus a potential link to higher consciousness. So by raising the serpent fire, They can be consciously activated, and this brings about different forms and levels of astral consciousness. So we have to think about that too. When certain people are writing text and they're saying astral, are they meaning the same thing? I think we can all agree on like the etheric double, what that is. But when you hear people say, "Oh, I've astral traveled before," or astral travel, or even astral light, do they really mean the same thing? I think it's important. You should ask, like, what do you mean by that? So Woodruff's objection to all of this is that it is a variance with traditional yoga aims and beliefs, and that the term astral is indeed one of Western origin. Also, that the aim of the Indian yogi is not astral consciousness or clairvoyance, but spiritual aspirations far beyond that. He also takes issue with Leadbeater's assertion that Kundalini is of a different order of nature from prana. Nonetheless, whether they be distortions, misunderstandings, adaptations, or improvements, the teachings of Leadbeater and Besant have permeated modern Western occultism to a considerable degree, often quite unconsciously. Late night radio would be the bomb. Hey, have you guys ever heard John Denver's late night radio? You got to listen to that track, right? I wonder if John Denver beat his wife while he was singing that track. It's a really cool song, though. That was a joke, by the way. Anyways, there are indeed many who consider that the lines of teaching derived from the works of Madame Blavatsky constitute the genuine Western tradition, although this is to ignore established streams in Western cultures such as the Rosicrucians, Kabbalistic and Hermetic traditions also, which indeed were well known to Blavatsky and acknowledged in her original works. The proof of the pudding is, of course, in the eating. That's the case, hands down, always. Leadbeater claimed that his system had been developed from personal experience, and there seems no reason to doubt him on this point. So it is no more than Dion Fortune also claims in the right to find her own way in these matters, choosing those ideas that seem to be congenial and testing them against her own experience. Why in the hell didn't you just say that? Like that wouldn't have ate up a whole hour of stuff. So, have you ever, here's a question as we go into the top of the hour. Have you ever talked to somebody that says they've had the Kundalini experience or an awakening? And should you believe them just because they tell you so? Remember, people are very, very good storytellers. And if you're at my age, you've met many people who lie so well that it seems natural. It seems like they are telling the truth, and they believe it so much that in their mind they probably are telling the truth. It's not a judgment, okay? But I've known it to be in human nature that we like to make things one up people's stories, right? If you ever get into a circle of people, somebody will tell a story, and it's just human nature. Another person will try to one-up that story, and then another person tries to one-up that story. Well, it's the same thing. When a person tells a story to you, they don't want to be boring. So when they're working with these energies, and let's say it only tickled the base of their spine, and maybe they're something else, it's not much of a story. But if they go into this dramatic detail about how, their head exploded, they ended up in a nutcase asylum, and they went to the 12th dimension, and all these different things, you need to use your intuition. They could be telling you the truth. But this is where the intuition really matters. And I also think that the people have had really, really big time mystical experiences. We don't hear from a lot of them. I think, in my opinion, and this doesn't have anything to do with yoga, but Dr. Stylianos Ateshlis was one, for sure, was one of them. I think Madame Blavatsky had something going on that we don't really know about. That's why I'm fascinated with her story. Edgar Casey was another one. The list goes on. But when it comes to people that actually know this stuff or have had experiences and that they even wrote books, the knowledge or the understanding is like 15% to maybe 85% of either people totally bullshitting you or adding things on to their story that's not necessarily what happened. Okay. Mike Maxey says the word awakening has been totally hijacked. Hell yeah, it has, man. I think a lot of things have been hijacked. A lot of things. Because right now most people are afraid. That's just it. They're in some form of fear. At what level, it doesn't matter. And they're trying to live their life, and they want to be happy and abundant and all that stuff. And right now, a lot of people can't even see, not saying you, but a lot of people can't see how to even have that. So they go towards this route, trying to find some magical way of fixing these things, which is fine. I mean, that's kind of how we all got here. And then you get on YouTube and everything that's been taught about, like this energy that we're talking about, or conscious exploration or conscious awakening, or even spirituality, it's all turned into either like a conspiracy or some kind of comic book entertaining thing, or a segregating thing to talk about, to pick fights with people, and it's like we're just slowly disconnecting one little thing at a time. Shit, I'm about to go on a rant. I can't do that. We got it. All right, so there's 3-minute break here. Yeah, 3.5. I got to go to the restroom. Be right back. Palladians.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Megaton, H-bombs, nerve gas, napalm, same song, find the phone booth, throw the
Man.
cape on. Face long, mankind's way gone, the serpent in the suit.
I'd rather listen to Decca. One of these nights we'll have to keep doing. I was thinking about doing a music show on Mixler, but that just depends on who all's into it or not. All right, so we're getting into this whole the energies of yoga, the chakras, all of this stuff. Because yesterday, wait, can y'all hear me? Yeah, all right. Because yesterday we talked about this energy, but it's cool. We got to look into the history of it and see where it comes from. It's the same thing in the Western philosophies when they talk about the Philosopher's Stone. You know, like when you look into that people actually tried to create a stone. You know how many alchemists lost their life trying to create a physical Philosopher's Stone? They inhaled gases and poisons and things like that, and that killed them. Well, this is why this stuff can get dangerous. Just hear me out real quick, okay? If your goal is to like three things, I think, just my opinion, but if your goal is to explore consciousness, to find the truth about who you are, where you came from, what's this all about, and I would say, you know, love and all that stuff, connection, whatever. That's great. Where the lines get blurry is when you're trying to get power, right? Like when you're trying to get a power above other people, or when you're trying to use this stuff for your own benefit in a bad way. Like, I guess I could give some examples. Like secretly spying on people. That shit is real, y'all. Yeah, you might not believe me, and it sounds completely freaking wackadoo, but it drives me up the wall. And these aren't even occultists. These are astral travelers. And by the way, most of them are occultists, the ones that like to go peekaboo. They like to sneak around and look at people while they're doing whatever. Isn't that creepy? Imagine you're like sitting here right now listening to the radio, and you look to the right, and there's some chode just looking in your window, you know? But for some reason, these people, they think that because, well, it's in the astral world. So if I go around and, like spy on people, it's not the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same. The only difference is you're in a different like dimension or whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing. Another thing is like, I don't know, these lines get blurry too, but when you're trying just to manifest stuff for like money, wealth, power, sex, things like that, which is something, come on, we all kind of want, but you shouldn't have to. Oh, dude, like when I talk about this, it's so complicated because if you know how to do it, let's say, for example, like if you know how to tap into a certain current of energy or time or season, right? Even the Bible says there's a season for everything or whatever. And when you tap into those seasons of those things, or when you give glory to God or certain things, you get certain things. And now, that's all cool. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it's when you withhold it. Right? It's like, I'm going to keep this to myself because Daddy always told me if I tell my secrets that all my good stuff in my life will go away. Well, then you don't believe in abundance, right? That's coming from a place of fear. Either, and this is polar. I hate to get polar about it, but it's true. Either you believe that there's enough to go around for every living person on the earth in every aspect, or you don't. And if you don't, then you're going to be in fear and you're going to try to hold stuff to yourself all the time. So all of this information for years has been talked about in that sense. So we still have to find the truth. And when we read these books, we start to realize that all of the teachings that we've been taught about yoga, the occult, the out-of-body experience, these energetic powers, and all of these different things at the very base of their teachings have been a little bit, it's not exact as we think. Because at the very highest levels, the wisest people that are exploring consciousness, they have misunderstandings, or they don't totally agree on certain things, or they're still trying to figure things out. So how can we, one, sit back and point our finger and treat this like it's some secret knowledge and then keep it to ourselves? It just doesn't even make sense from a truth-seeking point of view, right? Also, doesn't it make sense from a point of view where we point our fingers and say it's evil? Shit. I said I wouldn't go on a rant, but that's why I like to read about this stuff and talk to you about it, so you can see that it's not as black and white as everybody's making it out to be. Like, look here. So if you get into Sir John Woodruff's works, upon which Dion Fortune largely talks, that's where she got all her stuff on yoga. Another important source of information comes from the Buddhist traditions. I'm not leaving that out, because I know some people are wondering that, of yoga found in Tibet. Really good stuff there, too. And apart from the traveling tales of Madame Alexandra David Neal, the great pioneer in giving us access to Tibetan yoga was the American anthropologist W.Y. Evans Wentz. As a young man, he created quite a stir with the fairy faith. You ever wonder where that comes from? Like how that blew up, the whole fae and the fairy faith in Celtic countries? He blew that up in 1906, big time. And a long report of anecdotal field work on fairy traditions and sightings. I've never seen a fairy, by the way, not one. Okay, I'm not saying they're not real, but that's like a Bigfoot to me. However, there's been a lot of sightings, aided and abetted by informed mystics and occultists of the order of W.B. Yeats and George Russell. But subsequently, he went east and began to publish informed translations of yoga texts in the Tibetan tradition, and these included the one that you know about the most, the Tibetan Book of the Dead that gets talked about in a million YouTube channels, the Tibet's great yogi, Milarepa in 1928, or the Milarepa, the Tibetan Yoga and Secret Doctrines in 1935, and concluded with the Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation in 1954. He finished his life in California working upon the Amerindian traditions marked by the posthumously published Kukuma and Sacred Mountains in 1981. So in the field of Tibetan yoga, he blazed a trail in much the same way Sir John Woodruff had done with the Indian traditions. And in this, he made a considerable advance on the kind of patronizing and culturally blinkered commentary that had previously been attempted by L.P. Waddell's Buddhism of Tibet, or Lamaism. And that was written in 1895. And that was regarded as, or used to be regarded as, the authoritative text on the subject. You see, they should have college. Do they have college classes on this? They should, if they don't. Not YouTube college, but college classes on it, you know. Wait. Now, this also, the one that he wrote in 1895, that Waddell's text, this contained remarks to the effect that Lamaism was nothing but idolatry and demonology. Its mantras were meaningless gibberish, and its mysticism a silly mummery of unmeaning jargon and magic circles. Bet you that guy was a Christian. Just saying, he probably was. Either that or an atheist, one of the two. What's up, PK? With guides like this, who needs esoteric secrets? That's my point. So we talk about this stuff as like big time secrets. These are the great secrets. But when you read these texts, when you get down to the nitty gritty, don't get me wrong, okay? This stuff is cool. It's secret. And it works. There's something totally real about it. But when you get into the early teachers of this stuff, they don't agree on 90% of things. They just don't. And they're all attacking each other, and they all don't agree with stuff. And yet, we have thousands of articles and blogs and videos and stuff, you know, just teaching these things and explaining these things as if there are cold, hard facts, you know. My point is everything that you do, whether it's OBE stuff, psychedelic or shamanism things, if you want to go that way, or if you want to do high magic, ceremonial magic, or if you just meditate, whatever methods that you're using, it doesn't hurt to actually look into the history of all of the teachings about what you're doing. Why wouldn't you do that? Why would you just take somebody's word for something and just start doing it? You know, when I got into the OBE world, I didn't do that. I'd listened to Monroe's books a million times before I even attempted one thing, and listened to some other stuff too to make sure that what I was doing was safe. But I wasn't concerned about being fooled, which a lot of people, that's why they don't do things, because they don't want to look stupid. I understand all that. I didn't care about that. I cared about wasting my time. Come to find out, the OBE thing wasn't a waste of time. Same thing with magic. When I looked into the whole system of magic, I studied as much as I could about Rosicrucianism, alchemy, magic, all these things. I saw that a lot of them didn't agree on certain things. And yet, the system, no matter who's teaching it, and Manly P. Hall talks about this, about the mysteries, no matter whose book it is, what person's teaching it, there always seems to be a stage of development that happens in each individual when they start going through like initiation or whatever. So that's why I think Gareth Knight's saying, hey, like with guides like this, who needs esoteric secrets? Because you don't know. Sometimes it's hard to discern the facts. There are no doubt experts around who would find similar things to say about the opinions and activities of magicians in the West. Now this, particularly so perhaps as of all the Eastern esoteric disciples, Tibetan Mahayana Buddhism has elements remarkably close to Western magical beliefs and practice. So, Lama, and I can't say this name, Anagarika Govinda's Foundations of Tibetan Mysticism, which was written in 1960, the work of a German national who spent more than 20 years at the feet of the masters in Tibetan hermitages and monasteries, is a lucid description of the techniques of Tibetan yoga, and his book summarizes much of the detailed material of Evan Wentz commentaries and translations of the original text. We also find that Govinda's delineation of the chakras has more in common with the general scheme of Sir John Woodruff than of Leadbeater. Isn't that crazy? So you got a lot of people doing this work, and they're using the chakras and the correspondences that Arthur Avalon or Woodruff, whatever you want to call them, wrote about. And other people are using like what Leadbeater wrote about. And yet, that's why when you go to a circle and you see them they're talking about the same things, it doesn't correlate. You ever went to an event or a get-together, like one of those, I don't want to say the name of one because that's wrong. But let's just say you go to an expo of some kind that's all about consciousness, and then you meet two people, come together, they start talking about the chakras, but they can't seem to agree on certain things. Or they'll just nod with the, like, yeah, I get it. And then they leave more confused than they did before, so they keep looking for teachers to show them the way. That's because a lot of these things don't agree with each other at the base root of it. So we find that Govinda's delineation of the chakras has more in common with Sir John Woodruff. Also, terms such as astral, that word astral, or etheric planes are conspicuous by their absence from his work. And this does not mean to say that the states that we understand by astral or etheric do not exist, but rather that viewing the subject matter from a different perspective entails different definitions and identifications of the inner side of things. Thank you. Appreciate that. That's the best thing that you could ever do if you're into astral travel or the OBE experience is investigate what does that word actually mean. Really. Come back to me in about 3 months and tell me if you've got an answer to what that word astral, not the etymology of the word. The etymology of the word goes back to like starlight, right? But what do they mean by the astral plane? Because in a lot of occult texts, they're talking about a light. And sometimes when other people are talking about the astral plane, they're talking about kind of this etheric plane. So what does it mean? I'm not trying to prove a point. I am trying to prove a point actually, but I'm just trying to tell you that this is kind of why a lot of videos don't coincide when you watch them. So what Robert Monroe might be talking about when he has an OBE experience, for example, like when he goes to his neighbor's house, sees whatever, experiences whatever, and what another spiritual person on another channel, when he talks about the astral plane or astral traveling, yet they might be talking about two different things. This is why, another reason why conscious exploration is so important. So we have to be like these scientists, void walkers, I guess, but scientists to figure this out. We have to explore consciousness enough so we could all come back together and say, okay, this is what I experienced, and this is what I experienced. We know we have different filters, but what do we call this? And I think Monroe did a really, really good job with this when he started naming them, like focus this focus, that level of focus. He wasn't talking about energy. He was talking about levels of consciousness. Because if you listen to all of the travelers and their recordings, everything they report back is filtered through their life, their beliefs, who they are, how they see the world, their map and model of the world. You know, some people will look at it through color and geometry. Others will take a more Christian approach. Some of these guys start speaking back as if they're talking prophecy or whatever. And it's hard to make heads or tails of what's true or not. But Robert Monroe could back up and see the parallels between where everybody was at through their own filters and just say, okay, this is focus level 10. This is 20. I'm not saying he was right, but he had the right idea of how we should approach this. So I think we should do the same thing when it comes to the Kundalini energy. That's my whole point of tonight's broadcast. I'm just getting to it. Because when you get into the text and, you know, depending on what school they came from, what chakra system and all this other stuff, it's not all the same thing. So there should be some healthy, safe, careful experimentation with this stuff and then discussions. So, kind of like what he's talking about. So we also find parallels between Tibetan yoga and Western Kabbalistic magical practice that don't appear so readily in the Hindu system. An example of this is Dion Fortune's suggestion that the lowest psychic center can usefully be located beneath the feet. When used in this way, it could be regarded either as representing the path that the initiate treads on or the magic circle in which the magician stands. But in this respect, the diagram known as the 5 Dhyana Buddhas is very close to the classical form of a magic circle that's known to the West. A Dhyani Buddha is an ideal or archetypal god form of a certain type and aspect, and 5 of them are visualized, one at each of the 4 cardinal directions, and another balancing in the center. So that means that we kind of see a typical Western magical circle compared with a similar structure of Tibetan yoga. There is a similar archetypal function attached to each of the 4 quarters and to the equilibrating center, and the only difference lies in the detail of the symbolism chosen, designed to appeal respectively to those of either an Occidental or Oriental cultural background. And so he's got some... I wonder if I could show this, though. Hold on, let me see if I can pull this up so you can see what he's talking about. Can I? I can just do a window capture, I think. Maybe. See, this is the live thing here. I want you to see this window capture. There we go. All right, so I'm going to make this fit the screen, and then we're done. Transform. I don't know, fit the screen. Okay. Okay, so here you have the peacock. So you have the east, north, south, and west. You have the peacock, lotus, red fire, perception, meditation, all the discriminative wisdom. In the west and the north, you have winged being, cross scepters, green air, volition, fearlessness, all accomplishing wisdom. In the east, you have the elephant, a thunderbolt wand, white water form, touching the earth, a mirror like wisdom. And in the south, you have the horse, the jewel, yellow, earth, feeling, giving, wisdom of equality. And in the middle, you have the lion, infinite space, blue, ether, consciousness, the wheel, or transcendental wisdom. So when you go back down and look in at like magic, it's kind of the same thing, right? In the north, if you guys have studied this, right, you have Uriel, the star-spangled indigo, earth, tarot coins, winter, midnight, bear. So you can see what he's talking about, right? Now, like if you look at both systems, they don't even really know about each other, nor do they care about each other. Yeah, how are they using the same kind of archetypal things in these quarters? I think that's very interesting, why that happens. Oh my God, darkness, man. We're in the void now. So the Tibetan system has a god or Buddha form of a particular color associated with a goddess or dakini, together with a particular type of throne and magical implement. The Western type of magical circle, of which there are several versions, has Occidental equivalents. Thus, in the Celtic system, the animals of the east, south, west, and north would usually be eagle, horse, cow, and bear. In the Tibetan circle, we find in the east a Buddha and a dakini embracing on an elephant throne, holding a thunderbolt wand, and from whom radiates the white light of the principle of consciousness. In the south, there's a Buddha with a dakini on a horse throne, bearing a precious jewel and radiating yellow light of wisdom of equality, and so on, and so on, and so on, right? So this kind of works both ways. So in the center is a Buddha embraced by the Divine Mother of infinite space, and from them radiates the blue light of heavenly wisdom. In much the same fashion would a Western magician invoke archangelic forms of Raphael in gold and blue, Michael in the reds of fire, Gabriel in blue, green, and silver, Uriel in star-spangled indigo of the night sky at the four quarters, with Sandalphon at the center in the dark colors of earth, citron, olive, russet, and black, etc., etc. So I think what the whole point here is that you can start to really see where all of this stuff goes once you study all the different systems of the occult, right? And I'm not going to get too far deep into this, but the reason why people do ceremony is kind of the same reason why we do active imagination, except it's a more advanced version of active imagination. This is only my opinion, all right? But when someone says, "Oh, you don't need all that stuff. That's just autosuggestion." Well, yeah, it is autosuggestion. But the real question you need to ask yourself is are you aware? Are you truly aware of how deeply you're programmed and how you're reacting to certain things and what you impulsively do on a daily basis and the cycles that you're going through? Regardless if your conscious intellect understands all of this stuff, are you aware that you're still doing the same shit over and over that causes your suffering, that causes you not to know who you really are, that causes you not to understand your heart at the deepest level? And if you become aware of that, then it's okay to use whatever means necessary to find the truth about you. If you have to, no matter how smart you are or intellectual you are, if you have to use tools to get down to the bottom of it so that you begin to learn how to speak to your unconscious, so you could use ceremonial magic, active imagination, right? Automatic writing, I guess it would be another form of it if you want to do that. You could use psychedelics, whatever, all of them. I personally like ceremony, but I'm a romantic. That's why I like it. That's why it speaks to me, because it works for me. but I intellectually understand a lot of this stuff. I can read any books and understand everything, and yet I keep doing the same shit in my life. Yet I still have the same deeper questions about everything. I know I'm not the only one. So that ought to tell you that maybe there is something to, just like when we we play a video game or learn any skill, we have to start at level 1. How do we deprogram the deepest programs that we have inside of us and learn to contact these natural forces that are in all of us, God-given forces that are inside of us? How do we reset all this stuff? You could use Buddhism, you could use Hinduism, you can use magic. I guess the biggest thing that I'm trying to say is that it's just a tool for conscious exploration, and it's important that if you're going to use a tool, I'll wrap back around to what I said earlier, in my opinion, to study its history. Like, where did it come from? Is it like an exact science? Do people agree on it? I have not found one damn video that talks about that stuff. Most of the stuff that I find they talk about is the occult good or bad? Is it evil? Is the out-of-body experience safe? Is it not? It's just so basic. Like, should I do it? Should I not? And yet everybody's willing mostly to take a psychedelic, which is probably the far more intense experience than you're going to have, you know. It's like, it doesn't matter what you do. All right. Hold on a second. How did I just prove my statement? What are you talking about? I do remember you now. How about we do this? There we go. I'll fix that. All right. Another thing, too, is I want to say, it's just because, like, I know you hadn't been here in 5 years, but the things that you're doing on my channel, the same things that you're doing that you claim to have the answers to, are the same things you did 5 years ago. So I'm going to make sure that they don't happen again as fast as I can, regardless if you support the channel or not. That's not how you're going to creak your way in here and be a cancer in our community, just by throwing your money around. We good? All right. So, despite differences in all these terminologies, there's a general correspondence between systems in the esoteric anatomy of the human psyche. Thus, Govinda's description of the 5 sheaths of human consciousness is quite useful as a reference point between systems, especially as it can be accompanied by a useful diagram that has similarities with the Theosophical Planes system, although it's not identical to it, which is basically what I'm telling you. All this stuff isn't super identical, but it works. So in his system, the levels of consciousness are shown as surrounding the central spiritual being. That's all it is a symbol, with the physical body upon the outside. You have to, here's where it gets tricky, right? This is also where it gets cool. So, like, when you do magic in your temple or whatever, you start to think, man, is there really like this astral realm around me, right? You start to have those thoughts. And then you read and you learn, oh, this is just like symbols. I'm speaking to my unconscious through my acting, through my drama. Just like when movies speak to our unconscious, except I'm taking part in my movie. That's really all I'm doing. And I'm tapping into these centers or whatever. And it's just psychological. And this it gets real trippy. Because it is just psychological. It is just in the mind. But then you start, all right, I don't know how to explain it with words. I'll give you an example. So, like, say you do, for example, the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. You understand after a while, like, how this is balancing you out psychologically, how this is working on you psychologically. Okay. You start to understand this. But then you'll tell yourself, because you have a polar mind, well, if it's just psychological, then there's no metaphysical realm and it's all fake and I don't need to do it anyways. Right? But if you push through that, if you're like, you know what, well, maybe I don't know myself as much as I think I do, and maybe I don't know much about reality as I think I do. So I'll just keep going and see what happens. And then you start to trace your pentagrams again. Those big scary pentagrams, right? You start noticing that you can see things. Like after a while you'll see like a bleed through sometimes. And you'll be like, is my mind playing tricks on myself? Or like, did I just see the thing that I was imagining? Like, I'm supposed to imagine this blue flame every time I do the drawing. And I know it's just a psychological symbol. And I'm supposed to imagine it. But I could swear that I'm seeing it now. Am I going crazy? If I tell anybody this, will they think I'm crazy? See, then when you really start to see that, like in Hermeticism, that the mind is everything and all is mind, that includes this reality too. That includes consciousness, like Thomas Campbell talked. It's just a greater consciousness system. So the longer you start to speak to the unconscious, ritualistically, so to speak, you could do it ritualistically, however you do it. You could do it with psychedelics. You could do it with prayer. You can inflame your life with prayer, which is a good thing. You could do anything every day. You'll start to have all kinds of what we've talked about them for years, synchronicities and all these things. And then here comes another voice in your head. Well, this is all bias and psychological stuff that you're doing to yourself. It's all autosuggestion. What happens when you start going down that road and that's all you believe is all of the magic and all of the cool shit that was happening starts to stop. Why? Because it's not as polar as everybody wants you to think it is. I can't prove what I'm saying, man. I can't prove any of this. But from my experience, it's not polar at all. It's not as separate as people try to make it out, like metaphysics and psychology. It's not even like they put this big dividing line between the magical metaphysical world and psychology, just like that dividing line that goes between the hemispheres of your brain and all this other stuff, the poles. But your job, and one of the biggest reasons why I believe that you're here to do and what you're here to experience, is the uniting of those opposites and seeing that none of it is actually separate at all. And the only reason why we call things magic is because we can't see them. If you can't see. It's like anything you can't see and all of a sudden it appears out of nowhere would be magical, right? Just poof, that would be magic. But it's already there. Just like the connection between me and you is already there. Just as much as the illusion between our separateness is already there. One is not good, one is not evil. So what the ritual is actually doing is bringing these two things together. It's bringing that, like, say, let's look at it like a figure eight. Let's say you got physical reality, materialism, physical reality, and the five senses down here. And at the top of the figure eight, you've got, you've got metaphysics, consciousness, and spirituality, the unseen world, the mysteries, Godhead, the creator, whatever. When you start to speak with symbols in any system that you're using, what happens is those two things start to come together. Those realities start to come together. And what you're going to do is tell yourself the whole time is it's either psychological or it's magical, because you are a polar being. And then, like, the more you do it, the more you study this stuff, and the more you question things, the more you do the work, right? Like, you'll start to see, well, it's not really separate. The only illusion is the separateness. And I guess I wouldn't even call it illusion. I really wouldn't. And here's an even deeper point than that. You and I can understand this intellectually right now. And yet, a week from now, we'll do the same stupid shit that we did 2 years ago. Or like I said to that dude 5 years ago. We'll be the same obnoxious, forceful person that we were before. The same person that doesn't have the awareness that we had, even though our brain intellectually understands something. So the more we do the work, the more we can bring those two worlds together too. That's how we change. That's how we grow. And I can't tell you how many times people have told me people don't change. And that's the one thing that I've come to believe, almost came to believe it. But I have to go back to this work all the time to realize that people do change. It takes a lot of freaking hard work and courage to grow. You have to be able to like grow through everything, right? This stuff is fun to talk about, but are you going to be able to do this stuff when you're busted down to nothing? When everybody that used to be there isolate, they just leave you? Or when you're sick or when you're in health, like, are you going to be able to do the work? Is it going to matter to you when it doesn't stimulate your mind as much as it did before? That's the thing that I've come to learn about this stuff. And when no matter what system I use, I come under fire all the time by people. Not a lot of people. It's not like just like you come under fire about stuff in your life. It's not on a mass level. It's just, it's a very misunderstood thing, you know. So like we were talking about yesterday, the physical body is built up and sustained by food, and within it is a subtle, fine material sheath consisting of prana that is sustained by breath. Remember, the breath can be controlled consciously or unconsciously. That's why we use it so much. Then comes the thought body or personality, which is formed by active thought and with what Govinda calls our potential consciousness, containing the totality of our spiritual capacities. And central to all is universal consciousness, whose natural condition and abode is great joy, which is only experienced in a state of enlightenment and high yogic meditation. So it's important to realize that the sheaths aren't separate layers, but are mutually interpenetrating forms of energy. The body is penetrated by the breath is imbued with thought or intelligence, and all three are motivated by an indwelling deeper consciousness that is based on past experiences. Just like Thomas Campbell says, a greater conscious system. The spiritual body penetrates all 5 sheaths, although in the normal course of events is only experienced in advanced states of meditation as a flame of inspiration and spiritual joy. So he's got a whole different system that I think is the Govinda diagram, that I think works just as good as any other system. So it's taught to us that the human body is a replica of the universe, or a universe itself on a small scale, or you've heard the phrase, a microcosm of the macrocosm. The polar currents through the body are called solar or lunar forces. The solar forces are regarded as centrifugal, tending towards conscious awareness and objective knowledge, and the differentiation of intellectual discrimination. In the West, these ideas correlate with the silver pillar of the tree of life, and in terms of some of the gods we have discussed before with Apollo, Demeter, and Isis. The lunar forces are regarded as centripetal, subconscious, undifferentiated, regenerative, tending towards reunification of all that is separated by the intellect. In the West, these ideas correlate with the black pillar on the tree of life, and in terms of some of the gods we have discussed previously with Dionysius, Persephone, and the dark version of Isis. The forces flow through the body as psychic energies in 2 main channels, Pingala, pertaining to the sun, and Ida, pertaining to the moon, from each of which emanate innumerable secondary nadis or channels. spiraling round the hollow channel of Susamna, they are all three conjoined at the base of the spine. The Susamna, like Mount Meru, the mystic world axis, establishes a direct connection between the seven centers and thus is also the vehicle of another polarity, that which exists between the highest center and the lowest, as well as containing the synthesis of solar and lunar currents. The integrated solar and lunar energies are sublimated and raised from center to center until they reach the thousand-petaled lotus, or the state of highest multidimensional consciousness. Now, this polar integration is experienced in successive stages and successive chakras, each of which represents a different dimension of consciousness. Now, what's a fact? If this is a dream, then this present you is the dreamee, not the dreamer. I think you're right about that. So anyways, when it comes to the mysteries, when it comes to the occult, when it comes to all this stuff, this is why when you have to look at like 90% of the bullshit out there, like if you've done your research, has nothing to do with the ultimate secrets of the occult. Nothing. You know what that checkerboard floor means in the Freemasonic Hall. It doesn't mean half the guys in the damn Masonic Lodge don't even know what all this stuff means. But he just told you what it means on the deepest level. These energies, this polarity thing, these seven centers, this single eye, and all of the stuff is taught and spoke about in all religions, including Christianity. It is the mysteries. And what Manly P. Hall said, it's truly remarkable how the story of the mysteries never goes away, no matter who tries to destroy it, manipulate it, taint it, get rid of it, burn it, bury it. It's still there. All of the things that I just read right there, you can find in analogy in the Bible. Whether you like it or not, they're in there. But you can also find it in every religion, in every system of religion or spirituality. These two poles, this force, the unifying of these two centers, and what Dion Fortune talked about, that the secret to all the mysteries has to do with, I think, if I remember correctly, what she said yesterday was Tantra, psychology. She said Freudian, but we know it's Jungian too, right? And these energy centers, right? The sexual forces inside of us all. You don't even have to study spirituality. You can study Jungian psychology. What does he call them? What's he call them? The anima and the animus, male and the female, archetypal energies inside of us all. And his whole thing, his whole practice, Jungian psychology, was around individuation, the individuation of the authentic person, the healing of the individual, which is individuation. All right. This stuff is so cool. Now, take all of this. This is what makes me sad. When I read Robert Monroe's books, he's like, you know what? I don't want to call it astral travel because it has an occult context. And you know what? I'll call it the OOBE experience. And if you ask people that are super smart, like Campbell or anybody else, I'm not really into that occult stuff. It's all hogwash. It doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't really have, doesn't really have a say in what I'm doing or whatever. Because they don't. The reason is a lot of times they don't want to be associated with it is because it's been misunderstood since God knows when. It's been feared. What did I just read that sounds so freaking scary? What part of what I just read, and this is like the deepest stuff of the mysteries here, is scary, satanic, evil? Just because, like, certain, just because certain religions decided to, all religions, whether it's pagan or ancient Christendom, decided to sacrifice things or do blood sacrifices, doesn't have a damn thing to do with the truth of energy, the truth of polarity, and the truth of consciousness. It doesn't. It's just stuff they did to represent certain things. But they'll find more sanctity in the literal understanding of those things, which should scare them, than the deeper meanings of these things. Damn it. I'll go on here, though. In the practice, the Tibetan descriptions do not emphasize the spiral movement of the Ida and Pingala around the Susamna in the circulation of force, but tend to see the threefold column like a figure eight upon the side with Ida on the left and Pingala on the right. So even the Tibetans and the Hindus don't see it the same way. Did it work for both of them? We can probably say that it did. How'd that happen? The seed syllables of all the vowels of the Sanskrit alphabet are visualized going down the left channel, and those of the consonants down the right, in brilliant hair-fine red letters, moving in and out in harmony with the breath. The hollow canal of the Susamna runs through the center and is closed at the lower end as long as Kundalini is not awakened. In this state, like a coiled serpent, it blocks the entrance of the Susamna, and its energies are absorbed in subconscious bodily functions. The aim of Kundalini Yoga here is to awaken these dormant forces, and by directing them to the higher centers, release, transform, and sublimate their energies until their perfect unfoldment is achieved. The awakening of the awakening and raising of Kundalini is by no means the sole aim of yoga. The Tibetan poet and saint Milarepa, for example, took the yoga of the inner fire as the main subject of his teachings and of his spiritual practice, and this technique uses only the four upper centers and takes place on an entirely different plane from Kundalini Yoga. The creation and contemplation of the inner fire is focused upon the navel center, from whence, in conjunction with the visualization of the appropriate seed syllables, a flame is seen like a fiery pearl, raising up to the crown center, from whence the elixir of life flows down like white nectar. Same story, different teachers. They look at it a little different, same story though. The intensity of the flame grows and decreases in 10 stages here. At first, the rising flame is seen as fine as hair, then as thick as little fingers, then the thickness of an arm, then as wide as the whole body, after which the whole world becomes an ocean of fire. The ocean of fire is then reabsorbed by the body, becomes the thickness of an arm, then of a little finger, then as fine as hair, until it disappears altogether in the great void. This meditation upon fire arouses man from the slumber of worldly contentment. It fills him with the warmth of spiritual emotion, which can become the flame of inspiration, leading to that which may appear to be a reunification and asceticism. Although a Buddha who lives in the fullness of perfect enlightenment does not feel that he has renounced anything. The aim of yoga of the inner fire is not the production of bodily heat, even though this may be one of the qualities that may be witnessed as the snow and ice begins to melt around an advanced practitioner as he meditates. But the purpose is purely spiritual, and it is a common misunderstanding to think that the discipline was intended to enable the yogi to survive the icy mountains of the Tibet. Yoga, in any case, originated on the hot plains of India. The spiritual evocation of fire brings with it all its possible manifestations, ranging from bodily warmth to purification, radiation, enlightenment, transfiguration, amongst other things. But a similar idea is evoked in Charles Williams' novel The Greater Trumps, where by meditating upon the element of earth in conjunction with the appropriate suit of the tarot, earth begins to appear between the shuffling fingers of the adept and his apprentice. And later a storm is raised by magical concentration upon the other elements. In simple terms, the Buddha system confines itself to the 5 main centers, which can be divided into 3 zones. And then So that's the head and the throat centers, the heart center, and the solar plexus and lower centers, between which there's a threefold polarity. Now, if this part of this energy that we're talking about is real, what's going to happen to a person that isn't ready for it? So like imagine you're not energetically balanced. You're not psychologically balanced. You're not sexually healthy. Not healthy. What is it? Sexually secure. You're not secure in who you really are. You're not energetically balanced as best you can be, right? I'm not saying you have to be like super physically fit, but you're just way physically unfit or whatever. Like really, you're psychologically kind of warped or whatever. And then you start invoking this stuff into your body. You're invoking an actual energy into your body that if you do it, if you do it when you're not ready for it, it's probably going to cause problems. Look, most people will tell you that when they go through spiritual growth, when they go through change, it's not pleasant. Right? Like it's not a pleasant thing. Like when you actually spiritually change from what you used to be into something that you wasn't before, like something new, real change, it's not pleasant. There's suffering that happens. And even this, the only warning that I will have with this stuff is that, well, I'm sure you've heard it before, but I'll say it again. Like, if you go through an initiation and you just decide to stop, and I'm not talking about, I need to go to a certain school to be initiated. You know if you've been initiated or not. If you go through spiritual initiation, a trigger has happened that's wanting you to change into your true, authentic self and a vessel for this energy to come through. Right? If you stop after that, life can get really messed up. I'm not even talking about in the way of suffering. I'm talking about in the way of like the Twilight Zone. It's really weird. So to me, this is the only danger of all this stuff. The other danger would be being uninformed and not knowing what you're doing, or not even knowing the history of what you're doing or what it's really all about. Those are the only two biggest dangers. So before we end the broadcast tonight, I want to go like back all the way to like the beginning of what I was saying. If the occult world didn't have such a bad, unhealthy, in my opinion, viewpoint amongst so many people, what would have happened if all of these teachings would have been normal or healthy, and we lived in an entirely different society? And then Thomas Campbell, Robert Monroe, William Buellman, these people came along and were like, I'm having out-of-body experiences. Let me go over here and look at this and see what I can do with this stuff and see if it's going to help my journey or see what happens or if it goes together. They really couldn't and didn't, and that's okay. Because, we're all going to the same place anyways. But that's okay. But I just think it would have been way more cool if it wasn't. We can't change the past, but if it wasn't so feared. That's the only thing I think you should fear. Misinformation, because it's 90% of what you're going to read and hear and study about the occult is misinformation. And the only way you're going to know the difference is if you pull up these books like we do on this broadcast sometimes and start going into them to see what it's really all about. Or go do it, Those are the only two ways. Otherwise, you have a 90% chance you're going to get misinformed if all you do is just consume content, and that's the only thing you know. Hate to put it that way. But other than that, I appreciate you guys coming out tonight, and try not to be so serious. next week I'm probably going to get into some. I got some fun stuff coming, but I don't want to. Too many things happen, like the whole Mark thing. You know, this guy is still I'm trying to hunt down. Motherfucker, like he's had. If I had 4 out of body experiences, if I was shot 8 times and went out of my body 4 times, I'd be going on every freaking radio show telling the whole world about it. And I can't nail this guy down. He changes his phone number 3 or 4 times. Sometimes I see him up at the freaking Shell station and I try to pin him down. So now I've got my phone with me and the recorder on standby. And even if I have to just get 5 or 10 minutes with this guy to tell me what happened, I'm going to. But that's coming too, for sure. Also, I've had a few other old guests reach out to me and ask to come back on the show, so we're trying to get that scheduled. And other than that, I appreciate you guys coming out. Thank you for being as cool as you are to all of us here. And see you in the Discord. See you guys in the Patreon, all that good stuff. Night, night. Sweet dreams. At LVX. Love you.